Good evening, everybody, and welcome to California Free Radio, blasting live across the Southland and the United States, as a matter of fact, on social media at Netter Mike, on X at TaxFighter7, on X, on LinkedIn Mike Netter, on our YouTube channel Outrage, which I'm especially outraged tonight. I'll get to that in 1 second. And on our Facebook groups, Rebuild California and California Patriot Coalition. I want to start off tonight, and I'm with Scott Piotr, as I always am. Say hi, Scott. And Kurt's off tonight in witness protection.
Hi, Scott.
I want to start off tonight with everybody to take a step back. And for anybody that's not seen the opening of the show, I want them to rewind it a bit, send it to a friend, and pay attention to the opening right now. This isn't going to be my usual blast. Most of you out there have had a pretty normal 24 hours like we do most of the time. We get up, we go about our day, we go to sleep, we get up, and life goes on. For two families in Minneapolis, there is no longer a normal 24 hours. In addition to the people being injured yesterday, the kids, I want to stress that again, the kids, two of them died. We'll be showing their pictures later in the show. Two of them died. And for those families and for the people around them, there's not going to be 24 hours ever again. And I want you to think about that when you lie down tonight. And I want to call out two politicians on social media. One, of course, Gavin Newsom, and the other one's Elizabeth Warren.
Ooh.
In the case of Elizabeth Warren, I'm not sure it's her. In the case of Gavin, I'm pretty sure it's him. And as you saw from one of my posts yesterday, Gavin couldn't wait to put out, well, we need gun control. Elizabeth Warren couldn't wait to go out and blame it on guns. And frankly, on the right, we can't want to figure out who the individual is. Yes, it's sick. We'll get into that later in the show. That individual obviously needed a lot of help, didn't get it. Transphobia is a disease. But let's put all that down for 1 second. Two children died. Now, Gavin Newsom, you like to compare us to Texas a lot. Allegedly, that's why you're putting Prop 50 on the ballot. I'd like to compare something else to Texas right now. And that's the fact they're putting 10 commandments in all the schools. And everybody out there put that up with, oh, we shouldn't have religion in schools. That's not my point. My point is most of us don't remember entirely the 10 commandments. That's up to who you pray to, who you preach to, what part of the 10 commandments you believe in. But there's certainly some of the 10 commandments we as humanity, as a human race, ought to be teaching our children and teaching everybody. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not steal. And thou shalt not kill. And it's pretty hard to argue those points. And maybe, Gavin Newsom, next time you could pair us to Texas, saying that's the reason what you're lying about, why you're putting Prop 50 on the ballot. How about you just compare it to putting civility on the ballot? How about Minneapolis, which is being led by, shall we say, radical members of the other group? You put that on the ballot. You post that everywhere. Because the problem isn't that we become immune to gun violence. The problem isn't that we become immune to reading about these tragedies. The problem, very simple, is that the politicians on both sides of the aisle want to immediately jump to what they think they need to say, and the left and Gavin Newsom and Elizabeth Warren immediately forget the fact of what they're supposed to stand for, which is human civility. We're all part of the human race, and it's about time we had empathy and understanding for what happened to the victims. Now, all that being said, we are a political show. And in politics, we have two basic teams in America, and we'll argue about the finite points later. I get it. There's the libertarians and different groups. And we have the Republicans and we have the Democrats. Scott, we're Republicans, correct?
You betcha. No question about it.
And I'm also proud to say that being a Republican, it really helps to have someone join my team that knows what they're doing and is one of the so-called, I'm not so-called, good Democrats. I don't want to be very specific here. There's good people and bad people in each party. Scott, weigh in a little bit on, before I bring on our guest tonight, because we're going to have a very powerful show for you. I'm going to do a little bit of social media sharing before we bring our guest on here. But give us your feedback a little bit on what you felt about yesterday.
You know, Mike, it's something that I've talked about for a long time. Everybody talks about partisan politics, and gee, God's not partisan. Well, in a lot of ways he is, but instead of blue and red, he's good and evil. And clearly, what we had yesterday was evil. Yes, you've got decorum. Yes, you've got certain standards that you would expect to see in a Western society. But those Western society standards come from Christianity, come from the Bible, come from Judaism. And those standards, the Ten Commandments, as you referred to them, are universal. And we had a good example yesterday where the shooter was very troubled, mentally ill, some would say. I would say that the Democrats aided and abetted his illness by telling him that he could change genders and encouraging him to do that and allowing him to change his name because of it. So here you have a guy pretending to be a girl that decides these Christians don't deserve to live. And he goes and he locks them or traps them in the sanctuary and starts firing through the windows, killing 2, wounding 17, and then taking his own life. It's obviously very, very sad for the people that are affected. The 2 that died and the families. I mean, there's going to be an empty spot at their dinner table for a lot of years for those 2 that didn't make it. And even the other ones that did make it are going to be scarred, literally scarred for life. But I think it's a, call it a symptom, like you're saying, of a societal ill. And the societal ill is it's okay to do this kind of thing. And you hear the Democrat mayor of Minneapolis or Newsom or Elizabeth Warren come out and talk about guns right away, as though the gun got up on its own and went and shot these 17 people and killed these 2 kids. Yeah, I'm sorry. The gun's an inanimate object, and it didn't do it. The evil that was this boy pretending to be a girl is what caused the evil. And how that got there, whether he had a dad in his life, whether he was misled by the Democratic policy of you can change your gender, doesn't matter. The fruit of it is there's 2 dead and 17 wounded. And that's really sad state of affairs for our country.
And I think what's sad too is that we have literally hit the point where it's Democrats and Republicans, not all Californians. And that's why I'm very excited to have the guest on that we have tonight, because it's not often, Scott, that we've had a lot of great people on our show. And tonight, someone I literally met probably a year and a half ago, who is literally one of the great Californians that has, quote, come from the other side. And we like to say that today. But let's, without further ado, introduce our guest, Gloria Romero. Gloria?
Good.
Bring her in, Scott.
Good to
Welcome
be.
to California.
Thank you for having me this evening.
Gloria, what's amazing is we'll get into the fact of why you felt the need to change parties in just a little bit. But for many people out there, you were head of the state Senate. And I want to take a second, and we talked about this, you and I talk a lot. Explain to people what the state Senate is. We know that there's 40 seats. What does being head of the state Senate mean? And that's for California, everybody out there. That doesn't mean she was hanging out with Mitch McConnell in Washington.
Well, thank you. Actually, I was the majority leader of the California State Senate. The actual top leader is the president pro tem. So I was the number two in the California State Senate. And basically, the Senate is one half of our state legislature, the other half is the assembly. But essentially, we represent, or we're supposed to represent the needs of our constituents in our districts that should be drawn by an independent commission. They should not be handpicked like Prop 50 is trying to do right now. And essentially, we enact all the policies, all of the legislation. But one other thing that the Senate does as well, which is very important, is the Senate as the upper house of the legislature. We vote to affirm or we vote to deny the appointments that are made by any governor to all the vast array of commissions and boards. And so it's a very powerful house. And as Gavin Newsom always says, it's the fourth largest economy in the world. To be in the California State Senate is really a very commanding, a very prestigious, it should be a place of honor. But unfortunately, too many people forget who they're supposed to represent and really get seduced by the power of membership in the upper house of the state Senate. It's very regal. And my office, when I was the majority leader, I think was the most beautiful in the Senate. It was shrouded in red velvet, and you would just see people walking in, and it was one of those ooh and ah factors. It's easy to forget, and we should never allow any member who claims to represent us to forget who sent us there to go work for the people.
Interesting, Gloria.
I also want to say that. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say.
Well, I want to jump in. Go ahead.
I was going to say we have 40 state senators in this state, and as a result, each district is almost 1 million people, and congressional districts throughout the whole country are in the vicinity of 500,000-600,000 people. So a state senate district,
right?
Yeah, is bigger than basically every single office in the country except statewide offices, and frankly, it's bigger than 30 or 32 states. So getting elected as a senator, you're representing more people than 32 state governors are representing.
That's very true. I mean, it's the proportion is quite out of whack when you take a look at the numbers that congressional members receive. Many senators as well, because you have to keep in the reapportionment, in the redistricting. The goal is to keep the numbers intact. So all of the 40 senators or all of the 80 assembly members in the other house have the approximately same number of constituents. So some districts, it's amazing. There's a great land mass because some areas of California are very sparsely populated. It's interesting when you get to counties like Los Angeles County or even Orange County, you'll find much greater concentrations, many more senators because of the density of the population.
And so you were Senate Majority Leader. You actually served in the Senate. You got elected in 2000, got sworn in 2000, I guess the December of 2000. But then you served till 2010, I believe, in the Senate?
Correct. Actually, I was elected in 2001. And that was during that other crisis we had, basically the meltdown of California. The electrical grid was not working. And so there was a terrible law that was written. People were just outraged about it. And there was a special election because at that time, the current Senate member had resigned to go to Congress, actually. So it was a special election. The state was melting down. It was a very quick turnaround election. And honestly, all I had to do was pick up the phone and say, I didn't write that energy deregulation bill. And people were saying, I will vote for you. People were so angry at the failure. And yet fast forward today, 2025, and you find we really have not resolved the energy issues overall. So we're still in allegedly the fourth largest economy in the world. And I continue to get notifications from Southern California Edison warning me that my power might be turned off, or to turn off my energy in order to save energy. So it's really, there's a multiplicity of issues, but in the meantime, the current legislature and the governor are not focused on anything pertaining to the health and well-being and prosperity of Californians. They're looking at, of course, having a fight, a tantrum with the president of the United States. It's no wonder that California is perceived and is largely just a failed state.
So, before we, I was just saying, before we get into Prop 50, tell us why, after all of those years, especially in leadership of the Democratic Party, you decided to become a Republican.
My parents were Depression era Democrats. In my household, there were pictures of JFK, the Pope. They would talk about, again, to the reality of living under the Depression and really fighting for poor people, the working class. My father worked the railroads, and I used to go with him to the railroads. He would oftentimes talk about how important it was for the working man to at least fight for a piece of the American pie. But he strongly believed in this country. He knew there were inequities, but he never gave up on America. And I think it was a real patriotism that he taught for all of us. So that was my background. Fast forward, I continued with it. I supported, Robert Kennedy. I remember the night that he was killed. I was a co-chair of the President Obama re-election campaign. I was a very strong advocate as a Democrat. But over the years, I began to see, and the number one issue for me was education. There was just a disparity. Education was, for me, the civil rights issue of our time. I often talk about it, as others have, about it being the promissory note on delivering the American dream to people. My mother had a sixth grade level of education. I actually went to college and I ended up getting a PhD, and I later served as the chair of the education committee. And year after year, I would see the statistics, the data that the state of California keeps. It doesn't disseminate well, but it would show schools, thousands of them in California, simply failing. They call it chronically underperforming. They're failing schools, but there was no exit strategy. There was no effort to turn the schools around. So that to me put me immediately, even during all the years that I served in the legislature, in conflict with my own party, with my own caucus, the Democratic caucus, because I kept raising this issue and I kept bringing forth bill after bill. Most of them got turned down, to say we have to stand up to the teachers union, which primarily funds the Democratic Party, and do something to change the rights and the ability of especially poor and minority kids, largely whom I represented, to have a chance at the American dream. So it began way back then. Later, of course, I kept moving forward. I kept seeing the fight for school choice with my own party. I saw the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan, which, of course, we just commemorated yesterday, the 13 that were killed at Abbey Gate. It was just, and that was staged for a photo op. We saw a political coup right in front of our eyes. And even though Dementia Joe was not the best candidate, he had been selected by some 14 million Democrats in a primary. And suddenly, a failed DEI candidate was installed to run as our leader. I kept seeing the targeting, the lawfare against President Trump, and I had been a member of the ACLU, the executive board. I started silently sending checks to President Trump, just saying this is not right. I would submit it for his presidential, re-election election campaigns. So all of those things combined, and a number of others, but largely I just said, really, the values my father taught me about being proud as an American. I'm a mother, not a birthing person. My God, we have, as Latinos, not just one Mother's Day,
laugh, but I mean, it's like we
two
come up
Mother's Days.
Right.
Yeah, it's just crazy, all of this stuff. And finally, I just said, really, I'm not walking away from the party. The party left me. I don't know what this is. And the day that I saw Bobby Kennedy stand up with President Trump, I said, this is it. And I called a dear friend of mine, and we made arrangements for me to go to Sacramento to announce, saying, "Ya basta, enough, goodbye." The party left me. I joined Bobby. I joined Tulsi Gabbard. I joined Elon Musk, Leo Terrell, my dear friend. There are many of us who just said, I don't know what this is anymore, but this no longer represents an America that I believe in and I fight for.
And that was just last year that you.
Gloria, what?
Yes.
Yeah, the transition though, although your move from Democrat to Republican seemed anything, how did, because again, you're one of the few people that was a Democrat, I'm going to say, on the inside in the halls of the state Senate, which is quite prestigious. I visited as a kid, and you're like, oh, no matter who was in office. And it's like I started off the show, you probably hear me. I don't know where along the line the argument over the shooter, is it he, is it she? It's someone who shot somebody. I mean, I don't even know why I care about the gender. How did you see this transition take place though? Was it slow? Was it sudden? I mean, was it the way you were working with people? I don't remember this animosity when I was a kid. People were Democrats and Republicans like cats and dogs. We all lived together. How did you see this arising?
Well, I have a bipartisan family. My parents were hardcore Democrats. My siblings, there's 6 kids in the family, half were Republican, half were Democrat. We would get together for Thanksgiving dinner, and the motto was basically sit down, eat your food, shut up, and go home. And that's basically how we survived. But we would talk to each other. I was a university professor. I was a member of the ACLU. I used to encourage free thinking, debate. Don't just say something, support your position. And when I was in Sacramento, because I walked in from day one saying I was basically going to challenge the number one funder of the Democratic Party, which is the teachers union, and I never backed down from that. I think it was one where it was not unusual to sit down and talk to Republicans and Democrats. I remember many times I would sit there and I would listen to debates on the floor. And sometimes I thought, gee, this debate sounds really kind of like wacko, maybe somebody who I thought was rather far right wing. And then I would stop to think this person's elected just like me, same number of constituents in that case, it was his district. And yet, when I get up to speak, he might think I have some very far left views on issues that he might think. But the important thing was we are all representatives of the people. And that's what I think is lost. You talked about, Mike, the loss of civility. I think there's a loss of an understanding of what representation means. It doesn't mean a one-party rule. And I actually served under a Republican governor, which actually enabled me. I served under both Democrat and Republican, but it was when it was a Republican governor that I was able to actually get some of my best legislation giving parents real rights to transform failing schools, because I knew that I could build a bipartisan coalition to not get it, killed in committee and voted down on the floors. I could piece the votes together and push it to a governor who was supportive of school choice. And that's what we have lost in California. With one party rule, it's one voice speaks for all. And if you don't have that voice, you have no right to get something to a governor to get into a law.
And I want to ask a question too, because what we see from the outside, right? It's almost like, and this Prop 50 is a good example, okay? No matter how 495 that comes up, I mean, we could spend all night, what almost seems ridiculous legislation. Yet the Democrats today in both the Senate and the Assembly, from the outside looking in, seem so scared. I mean, they don't have a voice like yours. They're like, oh, we have to vote for it because you know what I'm saying? No one speaks up against their own party. Are they that afraid for their office, or is there a secret room in the basement somewhere at the Capitol? We don't know. I mean, I've never actually seen in my lifetime people that run for office yet are afraid to literally vote against the most inane things that make no fiscal or social sense. Why is that?
I mean, sadly, it's very simple. It's because they are looking for their next position. They're looking for their next job. You almost have to go along to get along. Look, I'm not in elected office today. I mean, that should tell you something. You speak up. I can go to bed at night with a clear conscience. I can look at myself in the mirror, but I no longer have the title of senator. I was a former senator. I'm a retired senator. We get no pensions or perks in California once you leave, but we always keep the title forever. So those are some of the issues that are at play. People are afraid. I think many of my colleagues are good. They intend well, but it's the fear, and with term limits as well too, that went on, people would be looking for the next job. And if you dared cross the line, believe you me, the wrath of the CTA especially and others would come down against you. And all of the unions would congregate. So, the injury, to one is an injury to all. And I was a union member because I was a university professor. So I was a member, by law, with the various teachers unions and affiliates. And if you dared step out of line on one issue, the entire herd brotherhood and then the sisterhood would come after you. So you have to look at all of that and understand that they basically no longer represent the people. I mean, in this Prop 50, and if the allegations are true, it appears that a deal was cut where basically the assembly member, the assembly speaker, and the Senate former president pro tem, I think they basically looked for, can I cut lines to basically elect me, get me into a position in Congress? So that's what keeps people silent. And we have to break that. We have to find voices that are strong. But when we find courageous people, then we've got to be willing to stand up and support them, because the powers that be will come down and rain, holy hell on, and to basically quash them out.
It's fascinating to me because, and one of the reasons, kudos to you, I like the way, sorry, you say former senator, not current politician, because I had talked about in the John Phillips show last week. John Phillips on KBC had asked me, he goes, what do you think, in effect, is wrong with Gavin? He gave me a 20-minute interview. And that was way too short a time for everybody out there in 20 minutes. But I said, I really think the biggest problem with Gavin Newsom is the addictive personality. It might have been alcohol, drugs, women at some point, and now he's addicted to politics. To your point about many of these other people, right? Gavin has to be campaigning. He's never running the state, it seems. Do you know what I mean? And then he gets in the room, and by the way, my buddy Jennifer Van Laar, Paul Mitchell drew these maps. Paul Mitchell, openly for PDI, works for the Democrats. Nothing to see here. And the Democrats, because they're terming out, have to run for the next office, because it's almost like a drug with these people. It's interesting. You are a university professor. Scott is an alleged architect. So he's told me. I've never seen him draw anything, but I'm going with that, okay? Forget what I allegedly do at this point. It doesn't matter. But my point is, we have other jobs, things we can do. And it almost seems like these people are so afraid. And again, if you think I'm off base, but they've got to have like the next fix, man. I got it. Like Gavin, it's like Kamala Harris is like, I don't think she ever, before she came to be VP, even ran a full term for the next thing. Hop, right? Is that what you really think? Is that why so many assembly and Senate members are afraid to stand up to idiocy? I mean, it's a job. I hope you know this. Well, when they elect you, you really can't be fired. I mean, it's not like a regular job, or if I kick the boss up, he can kick me out. But they seem very afraid. Why, is this union power? Is that what it is? Does it literally come down to that?
It's very addictive. I think you're right, and it's more than a job. It's power. It's influence. It's and many times as well too. I mean, the adoration at times. Here is Senator so and so, and you wonder, well, what have you ever done? But you get into politics, and like I said, I think there are many good people, but you have to be willing to basically buck the party. And when you buck the party, you are on the naughty list. And maybe you get thrown into, in the old days with others, into what is called the doghouse. You get fewer resources. Your staff get cut. You don't get the juice committees, or you get relegated to others. I was majority leader, and I actually walked away from that. And I said, I left that beautiful red velvet office that's, I think, is the most beautiful in the entire state capitol. And I said, I want to chair in my final years in the Senate, the education committee, because I said, I knew by that time then I want to run a couple of bills that will force us to look at the reality of failure, not just for 1 year, but chronic underperformance, chronic failure, and the doors of the schoolhouse being shut to trap the most needy of educational opportunities. So I walked away from that and I went to the little dingy education office. But interestingly, education is almost half the entire state budget, but it's basically controlled by the powers, the interests that be. Basically, if you think Wizard of Oz, I mean, the wizard in Sacramento is the California Teachers Association and its affiliates. That who is the wizard that basically sits down and runs the Democratic Party. And when they don't get their way, they come after you.
Gloria, I ran for assembly last November against Kati Petrie Norris. And, she had a 17-point registration advantage. It was a long shot. I was able to raise only about $60,000. She had about 1.2 million. And of that 1.2 million, she probably had 1.75 of that came from unions. And basically, if she were to cross the party leadership would shut down all that union money. So right. Then she's totally on her own again. She can't really do anything with her own resources because they're minuscule compared to what they have through the unions. And the unions play the games. I mean, you have the pipe fitters union in Riverside County donating to her campaign here in Orange County. Well, why is that? Well, that's because the Orange County pipe fitters donate to the favorite candidate of the Riverside County guys. So they all kind of just say, well, hey, where's the money go? And they just kind of divvy it up in their $5,500 chunks and spread it out to the Democrats the way the leadership says to spread it out.
Right. And I think your point exactly that how leadership says to do it, because I believe and I have seen firsthand, it's not the rank and file. Rank and file, like teachers, I go on and on about the teachers union, right. But there's such a disconnect between, the oligarchy, let's call it the oligarchy of the teachers union and the rank and file teachers. Most teachers want to be treated as professionals. They recognize that they would like to be paid on merit. They recognize they want to be rewarded for the work they do, that getting basically a job for life, which is called tenure in California, you can get a job for life tenure in California if you're a teacher after 15 months because of the way the laws are written and the notices that must go out. Even in the university system where I was, it takes 7 years through rigorous review. So if we can do that in the university systems to have rigorous review on teaching and research and service, why can't we do at least 3 years? And that was one of the bills that I tried putting forward, and it just got killed. Basically didn't get out of committee because it was like, how dare you try to take away our guarantee of a job forever, even when we molest children. I've never molested children, but when I say when people molest children, they get sent to what you call the rubber room, and they wait there because it's too expensive and too hard for a district to take on the firing of somebody who has molested children on that school campus. They transfer them, they move them around to a community or a school site where maybe the parents are less likely to complain or to cover up the what happened. And so it's just absolutely shameful. There's a fascinating film that's out there. It's several years old now, but it's called Waiting for Superman. I urge everybody find it. It is an incredible story of what the system of the dance of the lemons, where you just move bad teachers around. And it's difficult for parents to break out of a mandatory zip code style of education to find a school of choice for their children just to get a good education.
And they seem to be, what I don't understand, and again, when we go back to, because older, you realize, yes, government is individuals. I think for the, when younger, it was government, schools, right? But it's individuals. And I'm I'm really trying to understand. I'm going to pick on Scott Wiener, not that I don't all the time, but really, dude, I mean, the stuff you fight and propose, we know you're getting money from the real estate interests. Okay, put it on the table. I get it. Story for another day. But to fight things like child trafficking, which the Republicans have to shame. I mean, really, I'm trying to comprehend what these people are thinking. Maybe you can. It makes virtually no sense to me. I mean, why would they fight laws about trafficking children?
It's I just think it's sort of the loss of any sensibility within the Democratic Party, but they're not alone. You opened your segment talking about 2 children dead in that horrific shooting. And it was very personal for me because, I've started schools in California. I've started a number of charter schools. And yesterday, when I went into our weekly, professional development with our teachers, it was the first thing we talked about as teachers. And nobody brought up in that room gun control. Nobody asked, well, are they Democrats or Republicans? Nobody condemned the children for praying. My God, they're praying on their first day at Mass in the opening. I think it was 3 days into the school year.
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
all talked about as just the loss of life. And I will tell you, as a school leader and founder, the number one thing that I always look out for, and we talk about school safety overall, is just you never want to lose one of those little faces, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old. Probably one is just learning how to begin to read, having mastered some phonics. The other one is probably already into their chapter books and beginning to read. So you start giving them life and you read. But the first thing you do is you pray for them. You there's no words that you can say to those parents and families that are grieving in the community. But what you can do is have a community to pray. Is that ultimately the answer? Communities have to find their answers, but it's the first thing as human beings to say, my heart aches, and this is all that I can do to be with you right now.
I want to tell a personal story here, and I know this is your segment, but I want to really drive home what you said. My mom was a school teacher in San Diego Unified for 40 years. She was teacher of the year in 1986. Exactly the kind of teacher that you're talking about. Okay. The story I want to tell is to drive home what you're saying is when my mom passed away, and I spoke at her funeral, obviously, right? There were about 300 people there. My mom was 69 when she passed away of cancer. What was amazing, though, to me is I looked at the audience, whatever you call it at a funeral, the attendees, right? There were adults there who had been in her class 40 years before that said, your mom had an impact on my life. She was a 6th grade teacher. She wasn't a college, right? And it seems like because she gave a damn. And I guess I know most of the teachers actually do. That's kind of my point. They were like my mom, right? Like you are. And I'm trying to understand why the teachers union, I get money, I get power, I get all that. But they're talking about expletive deleted kids here, for God's sakes, that we're messing with their gender. We're not giving them an education. To your point, I don't see any level which help me. What's the people in the teachers union that are doing this? What is this really all about? Is it just about money and power?
You mean your mother didn't join or become a teacher because she wanted to join a union?
No, and she took her 4 or 5 years to get tenure when she jumped districts, by the way. I was actually surprised to hear it's 15 months now. You had to be 4 years and have a pretty good record. But go ahead, Gloria. Maybe you can help me out here.
I mean, the way that I would look at it honestly is we talk about public education, and I have come to the conclusion, and I came to this conclusion a long time ago. We don't have a public education system in California. We have a public works system. that almost half of the entire state budget that goes to education. It's about jobs, it's about pensions, it's about perks, it's about promotions, it's about ensuring that the adults in the system, the certificated and the classified, that they basically retain their power, their positions, their perks. And then whatever's left over, it filters down to the little children, those little 8 and 10-year-olds and others, even still not with any power themselves, because kids don't have a union in Sacramento. Parents don't have a union in Sacramento. The only unions up there are the ones for for those who work in the public so-called education system. So it's basically a very devious public work system. That's what it is. And if we were to look at what other industry in California, if you were to see the failure rates, and I call them failure, and the union would get mad at me calling, I was demeaning people. And I said, you have to be honest and call it like it is. The system is not working. It's not underperforming. It's failing with a capital F. If you look at how we post information about school progress, there's nothing that's easy for parents to understand. I advocate for a simple report card. Let's put an A, B, C, D, F label on a school, not to shame the school, but to identify it and turn it around. If you walk into a restaurant, I think in most counties in California, you'll see a label there, A or B. And are you going to walk into the restaurant that has doesn't have an A or B label? No, because
That's
probably there's roaches running around the kitchen. So, but we don't do that for schools. And when you look on the website for the California Department of Education, I have a PhD. I was chair of education committee. I speak fluent English. I'm a researcher. I can't navigate that website. It is confusing and it's intentional so that people don't have access to information. We obscure the data that shows that
so the roaches can scurry around without anybody seeing them.
Pardon?
So the roaches can scurry around without anybody seeing them.
We need sunshine in government. We should start with our data. Gavin talks about transparency. Well, take a look at your own schools then, because his kids, and I don't blame them for it. They get to go to some very nice private schools. They were kept out when it was COVID. They got to keep going to school, but for the rest of us, we don't get that privilege. And so we are at the mercy of a system that is designed to fail children. And until we understand that, then we're never going to move forward. So that's why I'm an advocate of school choice, homeschooling. It can be charter schools. It can be, micro schools at home. I want the traditional district schools to succeed. I want them to succeed. They should succeed. That's our tax dollars. But when those who run the system and keep, pushing the same lever so we get the same results year after year, decade after decade, it's time really to make a change. And so that's why I really strongly support various methods of school choice. Other states have had great results from this. I wrote open enrollment acts to basically just even let parents not have to go beg their district, please let me go. Because when you think about it, the way that a district gets its funding, it's basically, I call it the body count. How many little bodies do you have in your school, in your district? Because that's cha-ching, cha-ching. That's how money flows down from the state of California to feed you, and basically to feed the pensions and perks that you have to pay the adults. And every time you lose a child because a parent figures out this school is not educating my child, then they walk away and that money goes with them because it's not there anymore. So anyway, it's an amazing system overall. This is not just the little schoolhouse. We have really got to rethink how we understand and do education in California and to demand accountability and school choice and finding reformers who are willing to stand up and call out the system and make changes. But so far in California, we don't see it. We see a whole lot of wokeism. The superintendent for LA Unified, I think his salary is more than the president of the United States, I think. The head of the teachers union, Randy Weingarten, she makes a lot more than the president of the United States. Betsy Pringle, they all do. They make a lot more money. And their job basically is to fight for their members. That's what they do. And their members, they're not kids. They're not parents. They're not you. They're not me.
I want to add something too, though. Number one, when you go in the CTA site, they have a Democratic caucus, but don't interface with the Republicans at all. It's what I call in plain sight, right? So there's no mixing of ideas and you have one party rule. But something else, and I wasn't planning on drifting down this subject tonight, but I'm really glad we are. I don't think that's realized about California. Is when we talk about gender ideology, when we talk about these new things that come up, we're a single curriculum state. So one textbook, I think there's only 16 states that have that, and California started that. So one math book is for everybody, right? So these contracts are pretty big at 3 years at a crack. And it seems to me like that's pretty big influence and pretty big money too, right?
And the textbook companies basically write the curriculum, the textbooks for the biggest states.
Right.
Because that's where the money's going to come from. That's where the contracts are. But that's the beauty of a charter school, is that we still have to follow, of course, state standards, but we have greater flexibility. As long as we are teaching to the standards overall, we do have a greater choice in the curriculum that we choose. And so, charter schools have been shown to outperform nearby regular district schools in their area. And I think a lot of it is because we are able to use curriculum such as phonics. Hello, it's not that hard. If you want to learn to read, it's called phonics. That was what was done in my day. It's what we do today. But you'd think that you have to, that people wouldn't know this. A bill was run last year, the science of reading. So it's kind of a fancy thing, et cetera. It's just called Teach Them Phonics, so that they can learn to sound out and to pronounce and to read words for understanding. But but the textbook industry is also, it's part of the racket. Education, it spins off everything overall. All the assessments, you've got to do this. You have evaluations. We have to do painting and this, and only certain people can paint. And don't you ever ask a parent to volunteer to come and pick up trash on a school field, because that's somebody's job. So it's actually the education industry. That's just, the school is just the, sort of the center point, but there's an entire, like an ecosystem around half the state California budget.
Let's talk about, Scott, do you want to inject something? Because I'd like to jump to the moon landing, oddly enough. And this is Gloria's knows what I'm talking about, maybe, but go ahead.
No, I want to hear about the moon landing too.
Gloria, you had a great point that brought back old memories of me around a black and white television, that I think when we talk about civility and detachment, when I saw you speak last time at the Young Republicans, wherever the heck we were, Glendora or something like that, tell that story from your point of view, because much of the people that watch us are 45 plus. Maybe a shocker to you. We don't have many 18-year-olds with not much to do watching me on social media tonight. And hold on, if you are 18, 19, 21 years old and watching me on social media, I rarely say this, get off and go out and have a life. But anyway, back to you, Gloria. Tell us about the moon landing.
Well, thank you. It was good to see you at that event. I had been invited by the Young Republicans of LA County to come and speak to them. So, I traveled across town and I was thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about? And at that time, it was actually, we were commemorating I think it was the 56th anniversary of the moon landing. Mm-hmm. And I decided to introduce the topic with that, because once upon a time, I was a young person. And in those days, 1969, I remember it was a hot July night. We had the little tiny TV. It was a black and white. There was no social media. There was no internet. We didn't have CNN and all the channels. We didn't have you, Mike Netter, as well either. It was basically, you had a few channels to choose from. You had to wiggle the little rabbit ears on your TV to get some good reception. But the entire family gathered on a hot July night in the middle of the desert in Barstow, California, where I grew up. And we watched this. And I remember everybody was there. And it was the biggest thing. And I felt a pride. I think that's what brought us together as Americans. We weren't Democrat. We weren't Republican. We weren't Jewish. We weren't Christian. We weren't white, Latino, black. We were Americans. And I think my generation saw that. That was really, and again, we had been through some really rough patches as well. But to see that moon, because we had always been inspired, reach for the stars. And in the desert, I could go out and look at the desert sky and see those stars, and I could see the moon. And it was just such a fascination that look what our country has done. And again, too, going back to JFK, we're going to get to the moon, we're going to get to the stars. It was a message that challenged us. And so we fast forward to today, and I think our youth, we don't have that moment. I can't think of really one moment that really brought us together with a major sense of pride and aspiration. I mean, we all that brought us together at one time, one viewing. I mean, we're all off on our own channels. We're sitting in restaurants and we're looking at our phones. We have a million different channels and stations, but we don't really have that identity. And Mike, you may recall at that conversation with the young Republicans, even them too, many of them had never really heard about the moon landing. I mean, they knew it was there, but it was encouraging that many said, I'm going to go out and look for it. Because I said, go find it on YouTube. You'll still find it in a different way, because there's something like when you go to the movie theater. And I loved going to the theaters because you would watch the sensation together, as opposed to I'm just on Netflix lying on my sofa eating my own popcorn. It's different when
Wait a
you
minute, wait a minute. You're telling me that Taylor Swift's engagement isn't unifying the entire country?
I'll remain mum on that. But when you think about it, we've had great moments. I don't want to take that away, but of achievement inside, and really the aspiration, because to get to the moon, that was unprecedented. And even the young Republicans, they say, well, I know we've done different landings. And we oftentimes just say, oh, been there, done that, we leave it. But we should always come back to each voyage and is something that is spectacular and shows the advancements we've made as a nation. And I want our young people, especially of all ages, to feel that pride of we as Americans and what we can accomplish, and we do it together. And
You just said something very important that I want to dwell on for a second here. I think part of the challenge today is we are telling young people, this is what you can't be. This is what's wrong with you. Let's dwell on what's wrong with you instead of what you can be. And again, I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but hell, I am. We were told, you can't try for this. We can go to the moon. Not, you can't go outside because of COVID. We can accomplish things versus you shouldn't do this because it will tick somebody off. You see what I mean? And it seems to be what the I'm going to say the Democrats or the teachers unions have fallen into. Now, you can make better education, to your point, but you can't do this because it will upset the infrastructure.
Right.
And maybe we've lost, I don't know that we've lost it. I just think we need to recharge it.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And if you think about the call of, my generation, it was, ask what we can do for our country. And so fast forward to today and listening to Donald Trump, it really was making America great again. And that sense of being Americans. I mean, so much of what I had seen as a Democrat increasingly was we were all balkanized. We were all, you are black, so you have to go here. You have to be Joe Biden saying he was going to pick a vice president based on skin color. And so everything was about some kind of a sense of identity, which meant then you had to basically isolate into a group, and then not only isolate, but then you had to basically tell the other groups that they were bad overall. And in my family, like I said, it was bipartisan. We've had many discussions, interracial, interethnic marriages as well, dating as well. It was very common in my family. We'd hear different languages as well. And so I thought, this is not the America that I believe we should be. But it was so identity politics. You are a Latina, blah, 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 blah. And then the big kicker for me, because I've always identified as a feminist, quite frankly. But to me, being a feminist means I know what a woman is. And I'm not a birthing person, and I didn't chest feed. I mean, it's just crazy what we saw. And so all of that sense of identity, and little by little, I don't know if you saw just at the DNC meeting in Minnesota, where they started off by saying, we took away the land and blah blah blah, but they never gave it back, right? They never gave it back to the Native American people. But they're starting to silently say we're getting rid of some of these words, including I saw the birthing person on the list, which should have never been there in the first place.
I think you hit a salient point there. Maybe the difference between what the parties have become, for lack of a better term. Because again, as I started off the show, we're all kind of one human race, right? How about we shall not kill, we shall not steal, we shall not lie, and we can argue about whether you go to the Catholic Church, the Episcopalians, or a temple on a Saturday or Sunday. That's separate. But I think one of the what it appears the trap, especially in California, like Gavin has run into, it's like I have to find the next thing wrong to argue about. Oh, how about the land that no one's arguing about? How about the color of your skin? How about this? How about that? Where, how about, to your point, how about instead of what the next thing we should be worried about, thinking about the next thing you as an individual should be able to accomplish. Tell me why I can do something. Don't tell me why I'm where I am because somebody did something to me. And maybe that's too basic, but it sure seems those are the rabbit holes, doesn't it?
Right. And again, like there's this whole embracing of victimization. And make no doubt about it. I mean, there have been some very stark inequities. We clearly have seen victims. And I'm going to go ahead and say that. But you don't stay on the carpet. You don't stay lying down. You figure out, how do I pick myself up? How do I get there? And again, too, how do I go about and make a change? Like I bring up my father again. My father served in the military. It was a segregated military. He was in World War II. And when he returned home to New Mexico, he could have seen signs that said, no Mexicans or dogs allowed. He never gave up on this country. He believed in this country. It would have been very easy for him to say, oh, this is what they did. I fought the war and I came home and poor me, blah, blah, blah. Never did this. And the day that he was buried, taps were played at his funeral and his flag was covered with an American flag. And my mother was so proud of it. And we were all there because we thought growing up in a segregated country where he also faced a number of issues that he talked about and shared about, but he believed in the promise of what America is. And that was the value that I took from my family. And I think that the Democratic Party today has lost that, walked away from it, just said, you're this, you're that, never the twain can meet. You have to be this, you're a victim, keep that, America's bad and horrible and blah, blah, blah. And then you have somebody like President Trump, who to me, I believe, really represented the values of what the Democratic Party was that I grew up with, saying, this is a great land, but it's up to us, all of us, to make America great again. And so it was a slow process going forth. It wasn't like just one thing that happened, but it became a little bit more expedited as I grew and I began to see more and actually witnessed what happened under the dome of the fourth largest economy in the world, and the power of power itself, and how it can destroy and denigrate the people that allegedly those rulers claim to represent.
And I wish more. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, great place to end. But
right. I was going to say, I wish more people. I want to say this. I'm sorry. I wish more people. Look, not everybody's Gloria Romero. Literally and metaphorically, I should be clear on that one today. Where you are in a position where when you change parties or change opinions, the press is going to come and knock in, leader of the Senate, etc. But I know a lot of people, and we found this out during the recall, Democrats, nonpartisan, were against Newsom. It wasn't much they weren't for what Newsom stood for. And I really appreciate the fact not only what you've done, but doing now what you didn't have to do, and that's going out on a limb to make your stance clear. Because obviously, I'm sorry, Gavin Newsom isn't doing a very good job governing California. He doesn't even seem to be vaguely interested in it most of the time. Okay, most of these leaders from Wiener to Lee don't really seem interested in it. So God bless you. The way people find you, figuratively, of course, is you're on X, right?
Correct.
At Gloria J Romero. I always forget the J and then I put another Gloria. At Gloria J Romero. I look forward to working with you and doing all the great things that we're talking about, because we're all Californians and we're all human beings of the same species. And I get really tired of the press, which I'm a part of, by trying to break us up into camps and break us up because it's good for a small group of people that are unions and the center power of both sides of the aisle, so to speak. So God bless you, and thank you so much for coming on tonight. I love hearing you speak. You know who I want to say hi to in this segment, don't you?
My little one.
That's right.
Little puppy dog.
Look,
so,
let me grab him.
so Gloria, I want to echo that.
Here he is. This is little Tubby, who accompanies me on most of my journeys and adventures. And so he's saying hello. And he was at the Young Republicans of Los
Tubby
Angeles.
is everywhere, and I sometimes wonder, all due deference to Gloria, if Tubby isn't like, like Men in Black, the real brains of the operation. But I never said this. Go ahead, Scott. End this segment. We'll let Gloria go.
And thank you both so much. It's been an honor to be with you and learn from you and work with you on all things. Thank you so much.
Hey, Gloria, thanks for leading the charge. The Democratic Party is failing across the country. Your Republican registration is gaining big time in every state, even in California, although California is much slower. But you're out there leading the charge and showing that what you're doing is you're standing for your values. And even though it hurts to go against the party that you've been part of your whole life, you're standing up for what's right in spite of that. And so thanks so much for leading the charge. I hope young Democrats all get the idea that they don't have to stay there. They can go with the party that actually does what they believe. So thanks so much.
Mario, God bless you. Thank you for coming on tonight. We'll be seeing you on the road fairly soon. And Tubby, who I expect to see fairly soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So I know that we started with the shooting, and I know we have a few more things that we want to say. One of the things is that we talked about is, these are the two kids, the boy and the girl, that both died yesterday. Mm-hmm. I'm going to
thank you.
Bigger credits here. And their parents are, and their families, they have that big hole. They're not coming home for dinner. They're mourning. And the politicians like Newsom, who is behind me with a big fail, that are trying to make political hay out of it rather than join them and support these parents and these families who have met this tragedy. Mike, you said it really well. We're dividing the country on things of civility, on things that is, basically clear between good and evil. And it's like, why do they even have to talk about which is good and which is evil? We know the killing of these two kids and the 17 others that were wounded, that's evil. The person that perpetrated it, that's evil. And what the Democrats are doing and saying and dividing the country over it is evil as well. And we all need to take a good hard look like Gloria and change parties if we need to.
I think dividing and conquer is an old saying, and that's really, whether it's the media, the press, George Soros. And I would ask everybody out there, we spend a lot of time, because we're smarter today and better educated today maybe than we used to be, and that's a good and bad, okay? By good, it's good that we know the root causes of a lot of these, but to the point I tried to make opening up for everybody, you should recognize evil when you see it. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie.
What a novel concept.
Yeah, those three basic things really aren't up for debate. I could throw adultery in a few others, but let's just stick with those basic three. And what you actually see Donald Trump doing today is unifying sector of people. Yeah, I'm for this, that, and the other. And if those of you didn't know today, yep, Donald Trump flew the flag at half-mast at the White House for those kids that died. Gavin Newsom and Elizabeth Warren couldn't even bother, and the mayor of Minneapolis, and the list of Democrats go on.
That's who you see in the middle there, Mayor.
Yep. Couldn't bother to shut the expletive deleted up for just a second. They really couldn't. Whether it's them, their handlers, the people they hire. That person, and I get a lot of arguments, it's a boy, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a boy, we can't. Who gives a rodent's posterior? It's an evil person. Not only that shoots into a church with a gun, but that shoots anybody. Scott, why are we having debate whether or not we should be cleaning up crime in DC? I don't really give a damn who does it as long as I don't get shot.
Yeah, I mean, the Democrat Party has come out as being pro-criminal. You know, they think that it's a bigger danger to lock up people who are known criminals for fear that, hell, we have too many people in our prisons. What difference does it make how many people we have in our prisons? It's a matter of doing right and wrong, and they don't want to lock up criminals because of whatever reason. Skin color, you name it, it's on their list. They don't want to do it. So I don't know why the Democrat Party is against it.
Gavin Newsom announced today that he's sending the CHP into some big cities like Los Angeles, Oakland, even San Diego, and some other ones to clean up crime after just telling me a week ago, oh, really? Crime's gone down. Crime only goes down if you're not the one having a crime committed on you. And I would seriously doubt that those families in Minneapolis really give a beep, beep, beep about statistics.
No, I agree. And so, speaking of statistics, I want to move on to the next issue, and that's Prop 50.
Yes.
And you know, we talked with Gloria as far as, you know, the teachers unions are picking the winners and the losers, and in effect, what redistricting does, the way that they're proposing to redistrict, the politicians are picking their voters rather than we, the voters, picking our politicians, which is not the way it's designed to be, right? So he's using the excuse of Texas as a way to, I know, as a way to justify his Gavin mandering. But the reality of it is there's about 40% of the people that voted for Trump in the state of California last November, and we only have about 17% of the Republicans, of the people that represent us in Congress, only 17% are Republican, not 40%. So we're already gerrymandered out, and he wants to bring us down to more like 4% for Republicans, even though we represent 40% of the electorate. Tell us why that's bad, Mike.
Let's just start with Gavin Newsom and his out and out line. Let's cut through the garbage. Gavin Newsom originally came out and said, I'm going to do this if Texas does this. Then Gavin Newsom and his legislative cronies, just cut through all the little niceties for a second, pulled that Texas clause. They pulled that Texas clause from the actual ballot measure, meaning it's not contingent on Texas. And Stephanie, you're absolutely right. They're instilling and installing fear on us in one of the comments. So now the ballot measure title says, oh, it's the battle for fair elections or whatever the expletive deleted they call it as a reaction to Texas. It's not. It's flat out not. The governor of California, along with all the legislative minions, is lying to the people of California. And I just want to go, Scott, back to one of those basic tenets that I opened the show with. Lying is a violation of any human civility. I want to hold and go on a rant for one more second before we even get to any other issues, because I believe this to be the issues of the day. I have a friend, Dr. Glenn Clash, who wrote a book recently. And his book that he wrote, and I'll put it out in my X feed and whatever later, he's got a PhD, he's a psychologist, he's a preacher. He studied the 6 major religions in depth around the world. And forget what they are for a second. They have different variances of them, obviously some of them lie. But you know what's fascinating, Scott? Independent of how these religions formed, they all have pretty much the same 5 basic tenets. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not do some really bad things. And independently, humans as a civilization, regardless of where you go Sunday, Saturday, or if you go at all, kind of agree on those things. And I think the government of California has lost sight of that. That's what Prop 50 is all about. It's out and out lying to us.
Out and out lying to us in order to gain an unfair advantage. Now, in Texas, they're allowed to go back and redistrict. It's part of their constitution. They actually had a bunch of districts that were drawn in the last census that were drawn because of race. And you're supposed to draw it without respecting race, and certainly without going against race. In other words, trying to get rid of certain colors from representing us. But that doesn't matter to Gavin Newsom. He doesn't care. He wants to have all of the seats to do it. And in order to do it in California, he's got to do a constitutional amendment, which is why we're going to have an election in November. And then the constitutional amendment will allow him, assuming it's successful, to redistrict before people start pulling their papers in March to run in June for Congress.
Let's cut through the garbage, Scott. Here's the reality. Gavin Newsom's out to raise money. He gets on that YouTube video, which I watch, which thanks Gavin for lying about the number of people watching it live. But let's put that down and said, oh, I got a Trump 28 hat. Trump's going to run. Trump can't run again, you idiot. You are lying. You are lying almost seems today almost every time you open your mouth. And you state it in a way, well, look at the facts. Well, Gavin, we are. The facts are pretty much California's got one hell of a lot of problems. And that hat that Scott has a picture of you out there could only take place not even by a vote of Congress, you idiot. Either you haven't studied civics or you're out and out line. I'm going to assume that if you haven't studied civics, you have people around you who do. This, my friends, is a money scam.
Just acknowledge it.
It is a money scam. By Gavin putting this on the ballot, he's able to raise unlimited amount of funds. Scott, are you on Gavin's email list?
Thankfully, no.
Well, I am. And Stephanie, they have legislatures, I think, year-round. I'm not sure about Texas, but neither here nor there. The people of California voted in a system. Gavin is trying to override what the people voted on. And now I'm going to go in a tirade. One of the reasons, and Stephanie and many of you out there were involved in it, I got involved in recalls. We voted in the death penalty. We voted it in twice, and Gavin decided to override us. Gavin Newsom and the state legislature doesn't seem to really give a damn what the people that we elected him allegedly care. He doesn't care about us. He doesn't care about spending $200 million on an election, 250, 230, when it was a bad idea. We're recalling him, but it's a good idea now. And when the budget deficit happens to be at a record high. And by the way, that money that it's costing LA, and I looked it up, would fill about half of our sheriff's vacancies across the county. So next time somebody breaks into your house and violates human civility in Los Angeles County, where you're covered by the sheriffs, don't call 911. Call Gavin Newsom and see what he's going to do about it. Scott, give me a one blast here and I'll end this thing before I blow a gasket.
So, Prop 50, we already know Newsom is going to use this to raise money for his presidential run 28. It's going to raise his name recognition. He can do it with unlimited funds because technically he's not raising it for the presidency. He's raising it to pass Prop 50. So, like the picture you have on the background on our slide here, it really he's going to run it as a Newsom versus Trump. And I don't know that he's even going to insert himself in there as much. You know that he is because he's narcissistic. But he's definitely running it as a ploy to run against Trump because Trump has a lot of high negatives in California.
He's doing it simply as a ploy to raise money. And I want to leave you with this. Trump, Newsom, anybody you could think of. There are a number of families in Minnesota today, about 10 of them, 2 especially, that really don't give a damn. And maybe that discussion, Gavin Newsom and Elizabeth Warren, why President Trump is flying a flag at half-mast, you're yapping off your mouth at full speed about issues that you think will get you attention. Well, those families in Minnesota didn't wake up 24 hours ago wanting that kind of attention. And they're going to spend the next 24 hours every day for the rest of their life suffering by what happened. And maybe a lot of what happened was caused by the left. At the end of the day, those people really don't give a damn. They just know they've lost some loved ones. And I implore you, Newsom, Warren, and a long list of Democrats that are more concerned with their careers, to shut the expletive deleted up, start caring about what our #1 worst rankings are, and I'll leave you with that. Scott, are you ready to wrap it up before I blow a gasket?
Definitely. Let's remind everybody we're California Free Radio. We are broadcasting from behind the blue curtain here in California, and we will be back on air a week from today at 6:30 p.m. next Thursday. And in the meantime, don't forget to get the Netter News. Sign up for the Netter News. Go to Rebuild California and sign up for the Netter News there. It comes out every Thursday, and it gives you all you need to know about what's going on in the state of California from a political standpoint. And it's free.
Right. God bless you. Good night. We'll be back with John Fleischman next week to talk a little bit deeper on Proposition 50. But in the meantime, please, when you get off watching us tonight, say a prayer for those families and also a prayer for the soul of California.